Last year, Cambridgeshire police allowed more than 4,000 offenders off with a caution or reprimand, among them rapists, violent criminals and paedophiles. The statistics only became available after a Freedom of Information request was made.
Well, earlier I spoke to the Deputy Chief Constable of Cambridgeshire and I began by asking him if he could understand the anger caused by these revelations.
Yes, of course I can understand it. The numbers themselves are quite shocking, but of course the numbers don't tell even part of the story. For example, reference to the fact that we've cautioned 3 people for rape on the surface sound absolutely awful. But the reality is there are circumstances when people are technically guilty of rape and it would be totally inappropriate to take them before the courts. I'll give you an example. Any 2 15-year-olds having consensual sex may think that they're doing nothing wrong. Technically, of course, the male commits rape. Now, in many of those circumstances, it would be wrong to take a criminal justice solution, and therefore a caution is the most appropriate way of going forward.
What about some of the violent crimes and burglaries that have been written about?
Well, of course, the total numbers refer to overall violent crime, and where serious violent crime has taken place, if that's grievous bodily harm or burglary, where there's been a lot of damage caused or a lot of property stolen, then we take people through the courts. But if it's their first offence, or if it's a very minor matter, for example, assault can range from anything between a simple slight shove through to serious injury. If it's a minor matter and it's their first time, then it's entirely appropriate that a caution is used, because a caution is then on a person's file for life, and if ever they come to notice in the criminal justice system again, the police will know and we'll be able to take that into account, as will the courts, if they offend again, and most people don't.
Now, your chief in a recent podcast said that it's been a torrid few weeks and that no one's perfect. But it's down to trust again, isn't it? Can local people trust Cambridgeshire Police?
People should have every trust and confidence in Cambridgeshire Constabulary, because we're working very hard to provide a first-class policing service. I get really disappointed when there are headlines which only give part of the story. Just giving bare statistics is not sufficient when talking about crime. Crime involves real people in real circumstances, and we try to take into account all of their personal circumstances when making these decisions. If a caution is the appropriate disposal for us to use, we will continue to use it. If not, and in over 80% of all cases that require an outcome, they do go to court.
Mr. Fever, thanks for your time today.
You're very welcome.
Well, stay with us this Friday evening. All the news from where you live coming up.
The weekend weather and the weekend sport, and we'll be meeting a 92-year-old with a taste for adventure.
More news now from closer to home. 9 firefighters and 2 paramedics were taken to hospital last night after a fire at a Norwich factory.
At its height, more than 70 firefighters tackled the blaze at Heatrae Sadia, which makes water heaters. Alpa Patel reports.
Firefighters patrolled the factory at the centre of a massive blaze last night. A blaze which took several hours and 80 firefighters to bring under control.
The initial incident commander immediately made up because he was confronted with quite a well-developed fire, and intelligence led us to the fact that there could have been chemicals involved as well, because of the type of premises we were attending.
This factory produces water heaters. That means that there's potentially dangerous chemicals here on site. That complicated the fire, and 9 firefighters and 2 paramedics had to be taken to hospital but have since been released. Heatrae Sadia is based near Norwich Airport and employs 250 people. Last night's fire caused extensive damage to part of the building. In a statement, the company said Heatrae Sadia alerted the fire brigade immediately and safely evacuated all night shift employees. It is not believed that any local residents or businesses are at risk. Fire investigators are continuing their inquiries into how the fire started. Today, the factory will remain closed, but it's due to reopen again on Monday. Alpa Patel, Anglia News, Norwich.
Retailer Laura Ashley has been fined more than £23,000 after a metal fireplace at its main Norwich store collapsed on a 2-year-old girl, fracturing her skull. It happened at its branch in London Street in August last year, leaving the girl needing hospital treatment. The company admitted 2 breaches of health and safety legislation and was fined £20,000 by Norwich magistrates, with a further £3,500 fine for failing to review risk assessments.
A group of experts who were asked to find ways to make rural Essex a better place to live have reported their findings to the County Council.
Among their recommendations, the need for more affordable housing, support for local businesses and to safeguard the coast. Tom Barton reports.
The vibrant town of Maldon, with its shops, schools and sense of community, it was an appropriate setting to discuss the future of rural life in Essex. After a year of looking at ways to combat economic problems facing communities and businesses, the Essex Rural Commission today launched their report, which they hope will protect key services like schools and help Essex people who can't afford housing to stay in the county.
We think every village should have some affordable rural housing, and very often there are objections to that because people think they'd really rather not have it, but actually we know it benefits because it helps to keep the local schools open, it helps to create the different family structures.
Also on the commission was Professor Germaine Greer. She said they looked at making more use of existing facilities, like opening up schools to the wider community.
People who've got no computer skills, there are locked schools full of computers. They should be working 24 hours a day, those computers. And they should be being regularly renewed because they become obsolete. And the only way to do that, and in a sensible way, is to make sure you're getting the most out of them.
The County Council says it'll follow up as many of the recommendations as it can. Putting its proposals into practice will depend on the authority finding the money. But it wants to do as much as possible to safeguard the future of Essex's rural communities. Tom Barton, Anglia News.
Football now. Only 11 of England's 92 league clubs have yet to record a league win this season, and 2 of them are in our region.
Championship rivals Ipswich and Peterborough both try for the 6th time tomorrow, which is where Donovan Blake starts our Friday preview.
Will Roy Keane's latest additions to his squad spark Ipswich's revival in the form of a First League win? Liam Rossinia, on loan from Reading, and Grant Ledbetter, signed from Sunderland, should make their debuts at Middlesbrough. And with Carlos Edwards due back from international duty, they could provide what's been lacking so far.
What we needed to add, particularly in the last week or two, I think was real quality, and I think we've done that. I think it's well and good bringing players to your club, but I think these players will certainly, would improve us.
Darren Ferguson's in the same boat at Peterborough, where he's up against Ipswich's former manager Jim Magilton at QPR. Colchester's new manager Adi Boothroyd has been making himself at home at the Western Homes Community Stadium. He's without the suspended Kem Izzet and injured Pat Baldwin for the trip to Swindon, but that opens the door for others to impress.
I've took a few training sessions with the players. We've talked about the game on Saturday. We've had a game, obviously. We've had the preparation for that. We've had all the manic, hectic stuff last week with the press and everything, and it's been a really good week.
No game for Paul Lambert's Norwich until Monday, when they face their latest regional matchup against the MK Dons. So a little more time to work on City's attacking options, having failed to score against Walsall last weekend. As for Southend, Jean-Francois Christophe is back after suspension, and Alan McCormack should be fit for another Friday night encounter tonight against high-flying Leeds United. Donovan Blake, Anglia News.
A harmonica once played by Bob Dylan has been sold at an auction in Norwich. It was sold to a fan from Galston for more than £2,500. It was used by Dylan during a US tour back in 1974.